For centuries, the Celestial Imperium had conquered the stars, wiping out civilizations with effortless precision. Planets fell like dominoes, their fleets crushed, their people reduced to whispers in history. And now, Earth was next. To Admiral Kara's Thrain, it was nothing more than another doomed world, another inevitable conquest. Yet, as his warships descended upon the seemingly defenseless planet, a strange silence met him. No desperate pleas, no futile resistance. Just quiet. Too quiet. Then, in an instant, the void behind his fleet twisted, and from the darkness, they emerged sleek, silver warships moving like phantoms, surrounding them in a perfect, calculated trap. The hunter had just become the hunted, and for the first time in his career, Admiral Thrain felt something he never had before. Doubt. Before we start, please, subscribe to the channel by clicking the car button on the top right corner now, and hit the notification bell so you can get amazing daily stories as and when published. Please do comment your views about the story or any topic that you want to get a story on. We will make it happen. Let's dive into the story. Admiral Kara's Thrain sat in the command chair of the Eidolon Wraith, his fingers tapping idly on the cold metallic armrest. The bridge of his warship hummed with the familiar sounds of victory, scanners confirming the complete eradication of another human colony, crew members exchanging status reports in disciplined voices, and the distant echoes of explosions fading into the void. The smell of scorched metal and ionized air lingered, a scent he had grown accustomed to over the years. Another victory, another insignificant human settlement reduced to nothing. Karas exhaled sharply, tilting his head slightly toward his second-in-command. "Tell me, Sereth, do you feel a sense of accomplishment?" Commander Sereth Vale, a woman of sharp features and piercing golden eyes, glanced at him from her station. Her lips curled ever so slightly in what could barely be called amusement. "Should I, Admiral? The great Imperium crushes another backwater colony with all the effort of swatting an insect. Hardly thrilling." Karas let out a short chuckle. "Precisely my thoughts." His gaze shifted toward the main display, where the last embers of resistance flickered out. "This is becoming tedious." A junior officer approached hesitantly, his posture rigid. "Admiral, the planetary grid has been neutralized. No survivors detected. The colony is destroyed." Karas finished for him, waving a dismissive hand. Yes, as expected." The officer hesitated before nodding. "Yes, Admiral." Karas leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "We were promised war. Challenge. A species worthy of our attention. Instead, we chase ghosts through the void, exterminating farmers and factory workers who barely understand the concept of planetary defense. Their military presence has been minimal," Vale agreed, folding her arms. "Not a single fleet engagement worth mentioning." Karas turned to her, eyes narrowing. "Which is what troubles me." Vale raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I thought you were enjoying the ease of it." "No," Karas murmured. "It's too easy." Silence fell over the bridge. Even the officers who had been busy at their stations now stole cautious glances toward their admiral. "If I were them," Karas continued, "I would have gathered my forces by now. I would have launched counteroffensives. I would have at least tried to negotiate." His jaw tightened. "But they do none of that. They simply let us take their worlds." Vale tilted her head, considering his words. "Are you suggesting a trap, Admiral?" "I'm suggesting we don't know as much as we think we do," Karas replied darkly. A tense beat passed between them. The junior officer from earlier hesitated before clearing his throat. "Admiral, if I may speak freely." Karas shot him a side glance. "By all means, Lieutenant. Speak before I lose interest." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, there have been unusual reports from scouting vessels. Some ships have failed to report back. Unidentified transmissions intercepted in deep space, encrypted beyond our ability to decipher. It's as if they're watching us, Vale finished for him. Karaz's fingers tightened around the armrest. Of course they are. Then why not strike back? If they have something hidden, something capable of turning the tide, why wait? Karaz let out a slow breath, staring at the display of the dead colony. Because they're waiting for us to take the next step. Silence. Then a single chime cut through the quiet tension. An incoming transmission. Admiral. The communications officer called out, his voice tight with uncertainty. We receive a message from the Imperium High Command. Karaz glanced at Vale before turning his attention back to the officer. Put it through. The display flickered, and the towering holographic figure of Chancellor Rithos appeared before them, his expression as stern as ever. Admiral Karaz, the Chancellor's voice rumbled. The time for minor skirmishes has passed. The Council has authorized the final phase. Karaz's lips curled into a knowing smile. Earth. The Chancellor nodded. Indeed, the cradle of their kind. We have indulged this campaign long enough. Erase them from the stars. Karaz exhaled, nodding slowly. Understood. The transmission cut. Vale crossed her arms, watching him carefully. So it comes to this. Karaz stood, stretching slightly as he gazed out the bridge's viewport. The void stretched endlessly before them, but somewhere in the distance, beyond the stars, lay the final battle. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. Set course for Earth. Vale studied him for a moment before smirking. Finally, something interesting. Karaz returned the smirk, though the unease in his gut never quite faded. They were walking into something unknown, and it was far too late to turn back now. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace just beyond the Sol system, a vast armada of Imperium warships appearing like a celestial storm against the black void. The Eidolon Wraith led the charge, its hull gleaming with the cold menace of a predator about to devour its prey. Admiral Karaz Thrain stood at the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the distant blue planet spinning in the darkness. There it is, Vale murmured, standing beside him. Earth. Karaz didn't respond immediately. He studied the planet, its surface marred with scars of history, its continents crawling with billions of human lives. It should have felt like any other world they had conquered, but it didn't. Scan for defense grids, Karaz ordered. A pause. The sensor officer hesitated before responding. Admiral, our readings are inconclusive. Karaz turned, his brow furrowing. Inconclusive? There are energy signatures, but they're inconsistent. Shielding distortions, cloaked frequencies. It's as if they want us to see something, but not everything. Vale's expression darkened. That doesn't make sense. They should be launching a counterattack, raising planetary defenses. Karaz let out a slow breath. Unless they're waiting, the words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Admiral, the communications officer's voice broke the silence. We're receiving a transmission. Karaz raised an eyebrow. From the planetary government? No, sir. A deep swallow. Military command. Karaz smirked. They finally decide to grow a spine? The officer hesitated. Sir, it's audio only. That made Karaz pause. Put it through, he said. The bridge fell silent. A soft click. Then a woman's voice filled the room. Calm, measured, and chillingly unfazed. This is Commander Evelyn Drake of the United Earth Vanguard. She didn't sound desperate or afraid. No pleading. No offers of surrender. She sounded amused. You've been expected. Karaz frowned. Expected. He glanced at Vale, who had gone rigid. You assume this is a battle. A small chuckle came through the speakers. You assume you've already won. Karaz clenched his jaw. We have wiped your colonies from existence. We have destroyed your outposts. And now, we stand at the threshold of your homeworld. A pause. And yet, Drake said smoothly, you hesitate. Karaz's jaw twitched. I don't hesitate. Then why are you still talking to me? The words were almost playful. A flicker of something crawled up Karaz's spine. He ignored it. You should be begging for your lives, he growled. Another chuckle. Should we? A sharp beep from the sensor station cut through the air. Admiral, The officer's voice was tight with panic. Multiple energy signatures appearing behind us. What? Kara's turned sharply to the display. The void behind their fleet twisted. Ships emerged from the darkness. Not the clunky, outdated warships humanity had used before, but something else. Sleek, deadly, moving in coordinated, impossible patterns. Vale whispered, "How did they get behind us?" Drake's voice returned, softer now, almost pitying. "You've spent months hunting us, wiping us out, and all the while, you never once wondered the ships adjusted formation, aligning themselves into attack positions. If we were hunting you too." A cold realization gripped Kara's chest. They weren't the predators in this fight. They were the prey. "Open fire," he roared, but it was already too late. The first blast rocked the Eidolon Wraith before Kara's could even issue another order. The ship lurched violently as alarms screamed across the bridge, red warning lights flashing in chaotic bursts. Kara's gripped the armrest, his sharp gaze darting across the displays. "Shields at 70%, the tactical officer shouted. "Their weapons, Admiral, they're bypassing our outer defense layers." "What?" Vale's voice snapped with disbelief. "That's impossible. No known human technology can, well, apparently, they can," Kara's growled. "Adjust countermeasures. Return fire." Energy bolts streaked across the void as Imperium warships unleashed their wrath. The sleek enemy crafts, whatever they were, moved like phantoms, weaving between incoming fire with impossible precision. Some of them phased out of existence entirely for split seconds before reappearing behind their targets. Vale's fingers flew across the controls, her eyes scanning the impossible data flooding the system. "They're predicting our trajectories. Every shot we fire, they're already 3 steps ahead." Kara's clenched his jaw. That wasn't just superior technology. That was warfare, a level of adaptation he'd never seen before. The communications officer turned, his face pale. "Admiral, Commander Drake is still on the line." Kara's inhaled slowly, straightening. "Put her through." The audio clicked back in, and the voice of Evelyn Drake returned, smooth as ever. "That was fast," she said casually. 40 seconds in, and you've already lost 7 capital ships." Kara's exhaled through his nose. "You're quite proud of yourselves, aren't you?" "Oh, not really." A pause. "We just learned from the best." Something about the way she said it made Kara's skin crawl. He turned to Vale. "Tactical overlay. Show me where these ships are coming from." The display shifted. It was worse than he expected. "This isn't just an ambush," Vale whispered. "They planned this. They knew exactly how we would enter the system." Kara's ran a hand over his face. "They let us think we were hunting them. And the whole time," Vale added grimly, "we were walking straight into the snare." Another explosion rocked the ship. A Dominion battlecruiser detonated on screen, the massive shockwave scattering debris in all directions. The human strike ships moved through the wreckage without slowing, their formations untouched, their movements flawless. Drake's voice returned, this time with the slightest hint of amusement. "Are you starting to understand now, Admiral?" Kara's tightened his grip on the armrest. "You had this plan from the beginning." "Of course," Drake admitted. "You wiped out our colonies. We couldn't stop that, but we could make sure you kept moving exactly where we wanted you." The realization hit him like a physical blow. "You evacuated them," he muttered. "You sacrificed entire worlds just to lure us in." "We sacrificed land," Drake corrected. "Not our people. They were never there to begin with. You were fighting ghosts." Vale turned sharply. "Then where is your fleet?" Drake's response came with a chilling finality. "All around you." The sensor officer let out a strangled breath. "Admiral, incoming fleet detected." His voice cracked. "Thousands of ships surrounding us." Kara's felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had been so sure of the Imperium's dominance, so certain of humanity's weakness. And now, in a matter of minutes, he realized the truth. The hunters had become the hunted. The Eidolon Wraith shuddered violently as another wave of human warships emerged from the void. They moved like shadows, slipping through gaps in the Imperium's fleet with an unsettling grace. Their weapons tore through shields, bypassing defenses as if they weren't even there. The Imperium warships, once the pride of 1,000 conquests, were being dismantled one by one. "Rear flank is compromised," the tactical officer yelled. "We've lost 22 warships in the last 3 minutes." Kara's Thrain gritted his teeth. "Pull the dreadnoughts into a defensive line. Focus all fire on their leading assault wings. We need to break their momentum." Vale slammed her hand onto the console. "There is no momentum, Admiral. They're not attacking. They're orchestrating this. Every ship they take down is calculated. They're dissecting us." Another explosion rocked the bridge. Karas barely kept his footing as the ship groaned under the pressure of enemy fire. He turned toward the sensor display, eyes scanning the battle data. The Imperium fleet had been formed for one purpose: overwhelming force. But force meant nothing if it couldn't land a blow. "Look at them," Vale said, her voice lower now, filled with something Karas had never heard from her before. "Fear. They don't even fight like a military force. This isn't strategy. This is precision hunting." The realization twisted in his gut. The humans weren't meeting them head-on. They weren't engaging in the grand space battles the Imperium was built for. They were dismantling them. Every ship lost wasn't a casualty. It was a message. Karas exhaled, forcing himself to remain composed. "Prepare a hyperspace jump. We need to regroup." The navigation officer turned, his face pale. "Sir, we can't." Vale's head snapped toward him. "What do you mean we can't?" They've disrupted our hyperspace stabilizers," he stammered. "Our coordinates are scrambled. Every time we try to lock a jump, they jam the calculations." Karas's blood ran cold. "They're trapping us here." A chime echoed through the bridge. A transmission. "Drake." Karas clenched his fists. "Put her through." The speakers crackled. "I hope you're starting to see it now, Admiral." Karas's jaw tightened. "You think this is over?" "No," Drake admitted. "This is just the introduction." A flicker of static. The display shifted to show a tactical map, one that made Karas's breath hitch. It wasn't just the Sol system. It was Imperium space. Highlighted in red were dozens of systems, some deep within Imperium borders, some right along their trade routes. Next to them were countdowns. Timers ticking away. Karas felt a chill creep up his spine. "What is this?" Drake's voice remained calm. "We weren't just watching you, Admiral. We weren't just planning for your arrival." A pause. "We were preparing for all of you." Karas's mind raced. Those systems, supply chains, shipyards, relay stations. They weren't just human targets. They were Imperium weaknesses. Vale's hands trembled at her sides. "They're already inside our borders." Drake let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Now, Admiral, let's talk about how this really ends." Kara's Thrain felt the weight of the moment press against his chest like a crushing vice. The bridge of the Eidolon Wraith was eerily quiet, save for the hum of damaged systems and a distant echo of alarms that no one was bothering to silence anymore. His crew stood frozen, eyes fixed on the tactical map that had just been displayed. It wasn't just a battle they were losing, it was the entire war. Drake's voice remained infuriatingly calm. "You're realizing it now, aren't you, Admiral? This was never just about defending Earth." Karas forced his voice to remain steady. "You think a few infiltrated systems make a difference? The Imperium spans thousands of worlds. You can't possibly what?" Drake interrupted smoothly. "Cripple your logistics? Shut down your supply chains? Cut off your military fleets before they even get the orders to mobilize?" A pause. "Karas, did you really think we'd let you bring the full weight of the Imperium upon us before making our move?" Vale's fingers clenched into fists at her sides. "This is absurd," she snapped. There's no way a species as young as yours could have positioned operatives inside Imperium space without us knowing. Drake chuckled. Oh, commandevole. You think too rigidly. You assumed we'd play by the same rules as your Imperium. That we'd march in with fleets and declarations of war. Her voice turned sharp. We didn't sneak in, Commander. We were invited in. Kara's stomach turned. What are you talking about? The tactical display flickered again, shifting to a series of intercepted messages, Imperium transmissions, classified reports, even high-ranking council memos. Drake's voice was softer now, almost amused. Your Imperium thinks itself untouchable, but your rulers? Your elite? They have greed, just like any species. They traded with us before they even knew who we were. Small shipments. Experimental technology. They thought they were exploiting us. Another pause. They were wrong. Kara's mind reeled. The Imperium had strict policies on foreign influence. Yet here was undeniable proof that humanity had already infiltrated their systems. Not through war, but through economics, through quiet exchanges under the radar of even the highest officials. Vale stepped forward, her voice low, dangerous. You're bluffing. Drake let out a slow sigh. You keep saying that. Yet every time, we're exactly where we need to be, aren't we? Kara's exhaled, steadying himself. What do you want? The transmission was silent for a moment. Then Drake spoke, her tone measured. I want you to understand something, Admiral. You came here thinking we were an obstacle. That Earth was a piece on your galactic chessboard. A pause. But you failed to realize we were never playing your game. The bridge remained deathly still. That countdown you're looking at? That's not a timer until we attack. Another pause. It's a deadline. Kara's fist clenched. A deadline for what? Drake's voice was as cold as the void. For your Imperium to surrender. Or to burn. The bridge of the Eidolon Wraith was suffocating with silence. Every officer, every soldier, every crew member stood frozen, their eyes locked on the tactical display that spelled out their doom. The countdown ticked down second by second, each moment dragging them closer to the point of no return. Kara's Thrain inhaled slowly, his mind racing. He had led campaigns across the stars, crushed entire civilizations under the banner of the Imperium, shattered fleets that had once thought themselves invincible. And yet, for the first time in his long career, he was staring at a scenario he had never planned for. He was losing. No, he had already lost. Vale's voice cut through the weight of the silence. This is insane, she said, her hands curled into fists at her sides. They're a fledgling species. They shouldn't be capable of this. Drake's voice came through the speakers, calm as ever. And yet, here we are. Kara's exhaled sharply. You're calling for surrender, he said. You really believe the Imperium will bend the knee to a species it once saw as prey? I don't believe it, Drake said, almost amused. I know it. Kara's tightened his jaw. You underestimate our leaders. No, Admiral. A pause. I've studied them. Another pause, deeper this time. And I've studied you. Kara's felt a slow, creeping unease settle into his chest. What does that mean? Drake's voice softened, like a patient teacher explaining something to a stubborn student. It means I know exactly what's running through your head right now. You're trying to find a way out, aren't you? You're cycling through escape plans, desperate for an option that doesn't end with your fleet torn apart. Kara's didn't respond. He didn't need to. Drake continued, unbothered by the silence. I'll save you the trouble. There's no way out. The Imperium is finished. Whether it happens in a single stroke or over the course of a long, slow bleed is up to you. Vale stepped forward, her voice laced with anger. You think this war will end just because you've won one battle? The Imperium will strike back. You must know that. Drake chuckled. Strike back with what? She let the words settle. Your fleets? Crippled. Your military infrastructure? Already compromised. Your leadership? Scattered. Panicked, unsure whether to retreat or throw more forces into the fire. Kara's rubbed a hand across his face. It was maddening how prepared she was, how far ahead they had thought, how they had let the Imperium feel powerful right up until the moment they pulled the rug out from under them. Drake's voice was quiet now. Surrender doesn't have to mean annihilation, Admiral. It means survival. Kara's lowered his hand, exhaling. And if we refuse? The countdown on the display ticked down to its final minutes. Drake's voice lost all pretense of patience. Then the Imperium dies screaming. Kara's Thrain stared at the countdown, his mind racing through every possible scenario, every desperate move that could turn the tide. None existed. There was no grand maneuver, no last-minute act of defiance that would change the inevitable. The Imperium had spent centuries believing itself to be the apex predator of the galaxy. But now, in the span of a single battle, that illusion had been shattered. The bridge remained silent, save for the distant hum of warning sirens and the occasional spark of damaged control panels. His officers waited for a command, for a miracle. Vale broke the silence, her voice strained. We can still fight. Karras closed his eyes. Fight! He had lived his entire life by that principle. Every war he had waged, every planet he had raised, had been in the name of the Imperium's dominance. And yet, for the first time, he found himself wondering, what was the Imperium now? A relic, a fading empire that had mistaken control for power, brutality for strength. He opened his eyes. No, he said quietly. Vale turned to him sharply. What? No, he repeated, louder this time. We can't fight. We lost the moment we entered this system. She took a step toward him, her golden eyes burning with frustration. You can't be serious. Karras turned to face her fully. Look at the screen, Vale. Look at that countdown. Those aren't invasion targets. They're detonations. They've already won. He gestured to the tactical display, showing the hundreds of human warships still maneuvering effortlessly around the remnants of the Imperium's fleet. Do you really think we have the luxury of pride anymore? Vale opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was undeniable. The Imperium's era was over. A chime echoed through the bridge. Drake, Karras inhaled sharply. Put her through. Her voice came through, even patient. Admiral, Karras clenched his jaw. What are your terms? A pause. When Drake spoke again, it wasn't with the cold satisfaction of a victor, but with the precision of someone who had already thought 10 steps ahead. You will order your remaining ships to stand down. Your fleet will be allowed to retreat to Imperium space without further engagement. In return, the Imperium Council will accept the following conditions. She let the weight of the words settle. The immediate cessation of all military campaigns. The dismantling of war factories across Imperium territory. And full diplomatic negotiations under Earth's oversight. Karras exhaled slowly. You want to control us. I want to prevent another war, Drake corrected. Because I assure you, Admiral, if the Imperium makes the mistake of trying to strike back, we won't just cripple your empire. A pause. We'll erase it. The bridge was dead silent. Karras closed his eyes for a moment. Then, with slow precision, he pressed a command into his control panel. A transmission went out. Across the battlefield, Imperium warships powered down their weapons. Vale's voice was barely above a whisper. It's over. Karras looked at the screen one last time, at the countdown that had sealed their fate. And as it reached 0, it simply disappeared. Drake's voice returned, softer now. Good choice, Admiral. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.